I knew something was wrong with my neighbor the night his porch light stopped turning off. It wasn't dramatic at first. Just noticeable. Every house on Willow Creek Lane went dark by midnight. We lived in one of those quiet suburbs where people slept early, woke early, and minded their own business. No late parties. No night traffic. Just crickets, distant wind, and the occasional hum of a passing car miles away. Except for House 12. The porch light stayed on. The first night, I assumed he forgot. The second night, I noticed the curtains in his living room were slightly open just enough to see the blue flicker of a television inside. It stayed on until nearly 4:30 a.m. The third night, I couldn't sleep. I stood at my bedroom window around 2:17 a.m., staring across the street at that light. There was no movement. No shadows crossing the curtains. No sign of life. But the TV flicker continued. And that's when I felt it. The strange, crawling feeling that someone was watching back. I stepped away from the window. The next morning, I saw him. Mr. Hargrove. He was outside collecting his mail like always, neat hair, clean clothes, polite nod. He looked normal. Too normal. Morning, he said. His voice sounded dry. Like he hadn't slept. I glanced at his porch light. Still on. You forgot your light, I said casually. He froze. Not confused. Not surprised. Frozen. Then he slowly turned his head toward the bulb above his door like he had never seen it before. Oh, he said softly. Right. But he didn't turn it off. That night, it stayed on again. And the TV flicker returned. This time, I didn't go to the window. I stayed in bed. At 3:08 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text message. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in my chest tightened. I opened it. A single sentence. Can you see my house from your window? My stomach dropped. I didn't reply. Another message came seconds later. I can see you. I slowly lifted my head toward the window. My curtains were slightly open. Just enough. And across the street, through the gap in his living room curtains, I saw the faint outline of a man standing completely still, facing my house. Watching. Not moving. Not blinking. Just standing there in the dark blue glow of the television. I grabbed my phone to call the police. But before I could dial, the porch light outside his house suddenly turned off. For the first time in 3 nights. And his silhouette vanished. The next morning, House 12 was empty. No car. No mail. No sign anyone had lived there at all. Except for one thing. The porch light bulb was still warm when I touched it. I didn't call the police. I told myself there had to be a simple explanation. Maybe he left early. Maybe he worked night shifts. Maybe the messages were a prank. My mind searched desperately for logic, anything that didn't involve what I felt in my bones. Because what I felt was fear. Not loud fear. Quiet fear. The kind that sits in your stomach and refuses to leave. Around noon, I walked across the street. House 12 looked wrong in daylight. Too still. Too silent. The curtains that had been slightly open every night were now fully drawn. His car was gone, but the trash bin still sat by the curb, untouched from yesterday. I knocked. No answer. I knocked harder. Nothing. That's when I noticed the door. It wasn't closed. It was resting slightly open, just enough to create a thin, black line of darkness between the frame and the wood. I didn't remember it being like that before. Mr. Hargrove? I called. No response. I pushed the door gently. It opened without resistance. The smell hit me first. Not rot. Not garbage. Stale air. like a room that hadn't been opened in weeks. Sunlight stretched across the living room floor, revealing dust particles floating slowly in the air. The television was off. The couch was bare. No remote. No blanket. No sign someone had been sitting there night after night. The house felt unused. I stepped inside. My footsteps sounded too loud. The walls were empty. No pictures. No decorations. No personality. I walked into the kitchen. Empty counters. Empty sink. I opened the fridge. Unplugged. Warm. There was nothing inside. My heart began to race. This wasn't a house someone lived in. This was a house someone visited. I hurried upstairs. Every bedroom was the same: empty closets, no bed sheets, no clothes, nothing. Except the last room. At the end of the hallway. The door was closed. I don't know why, but my hand hesitated before turning the knob. Inside, there was only one thing. A wooden chair. Positioned directly in front of the window. Facing my house. The carpet beneath it was slightly indented, like the chair had been there for a long time. And on the floor beside it? A phone charger. Still plugged into the wall. I felt cold all over. I pulled my own phone out and opened the messages from the unknown number. Then I looked at the charger. Same model. Same color. Same small crack near the tip. I slowly turned toward the window. From this angle, I could see perfectly into my bedroom. My curtains. My bed. The exact spot where I stood 3 nights ago. I wasn't being watched from across the street. I was being watched from inside this house. Behind me, downstairs. I heard the front door creak. Like it had just been pushed open. I didn't move. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my body refused to cooperate. I stood frozen in that empty room, staring at my own house through the window while the faint sound of the front door settling downstairs echoed through the silence. A slow, deliberate creak. Like someone had entered carefully. I listened for footsteps. Nothing. Just the quiet hum of air moving through an empty house. I forced myself to breathe. Then I stepped into the hallway. Hello. My voice sounded small, swallowed by the walls. No answer. I walked down the stairs one step at a time, gripping the railing so tightly my fingers hurt. Each step groaned under my weight, announcing my position to whoever might be below. When I reached the bottom, the front door was still open. But the street outside was empty. No cars. No people. Just sunlight and the distant rustling of leaves. I stepped outside quickly and turned back to look at the house. Something about it suddenly clicked in my mind. I had never seen Mr. Hargrove carry groceries. Never seen packages delivered. Never heard music, footsteps, or conversation through the walls. I had only ever seen him outside. In the mornings. Collecting mail. Standing still. Watching. I walked straight to the mailbox. I don't know what I expected to find. But it wasn't this. The mailbox was empty. Not just today. Empty. No letters. No advertisements. No folded papers shoved to the back. Nothing. Like it had never been used. My heart pounded louder in my ears. I hurried back to my house and grabbed my laptop. Within minutes, I was searching property records for House 12. The result made my stomach drop. The house hadn't been sold in 9 years. It was still registered to an elderly woman who had passed away nearly a decade ago. No new owner. No tenant history. No recent activity. According to everything I could find, nobody legally lived there. And then I remembered something that made my blood run cold. 3 nights ago, when I saw him through the curtain. He wasn't moving. Not shifting his weight. Not blinking. Just standing there. Like a mannequin. Or something pretending to be human. I opened the message thread again. The number that texted me. I called it. It rang once. Then I heard it. From across the street. A faint vibration sound. Coming from inside house 12. I hung up immediately. My phone buzzed in my hand. A new message. Same number. You came inside. Another message appeared. You weren't supposed to do that. My chest tightened. And then the final message arrived. Now I have to come inside yours. I looked up slowly toward my front door. It was wide open. I was sure I had closed it. I don't remember dropping my phone, but I remember the sound it made when it hit the floor. A flat, hollow crack against the tiles. My front door stood open, wide enough for a person to walk through without touching the frame. Sunlight spilled across the entryway, too bright, too calm for the panic flooding my body. I knew I had closed it. I always closed it. I took a slow step backward, eyes locked on the doorway like something might step through at any second. Hello. I called out, immediately regretting it. My voice trembled. No response. I moved carefully toward the door, every part of me alert, listening for anything that didn't belong in the silence of the house. Then I heard it. A soft sound from upstairs. A footstep. Not loud. Not rushed. Just the gentle press of weight against wood. I froze. Another step. Slow. Deliberate. Like someone walking calmly down my hallway. I wasn't upstairs. Which meant someone else was. My throat went dry. My mind raced through impossible explanations. Maybe I left a window open. Maybe someone broke in. Maybe this had nothing to do with House 12. But deep down, I knew it did. The steps continued. 1, 2, 3. I could map exactly where they were by the sound. Past the bathroom. Near my bedroom. The same bedroom visible from that chair across the street. I forced myself to move. Quietly, I stepped outside onto the porch without taking my eyes off the open door. I pulled it shut from the outside and stood there, shaking, unsure what to do next. I called the police. This time, I didn't hesitate. While I waited, I stood in my yard staring at my house. I expected to see a curtain move. A shadow pass. A figure watching me from the window. Nothing. The house looked normal. Peaceful. Which somehow made it worse. The police arrived within minutes. 2 officers stepped inside while I explained everything in a rush of broken sentences. They searched every room. Closets. Bathroom. Under the bed. Attic. Basement. No one. No signs of forced entry. No open windows. Nothing disturbed. It's empty, one of them said. But it wasn't. I knew what I heard. As they prepared to leave, one officer paused near the staircase. Do you live alone? He asked. Yes. He nodded slowly, then pointed toward the hallway upstairs. These footprints, he said. I felt my stomach twist. Those aren't yours. I followed the officer upstairs, my legs trembling so badly I had to hold the railing. He led me into the hallway and pointed at the wooden floor just outside my bedroom. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then my eyes adjusted. Dust. A thin layer of it coated the floorboards because I hadn't swept in a couple of days. And pressed into that dust were footprints. Clear. Detailed. Human. But wrong. They weren't leading toward the bedroom. They were leading out of it. Like someone had been standing inside my room, watching, and then calmly walked away. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't go back into my room this morning, I whispered. The officer crouched down, studying the prints. "They're fresh," he said. "Edges are still sharp." The second officer stepped into the room, scanning slowly. "Sir," he called out. "You need to see this." We entered my bedroom together. Nothing looked disturbed. Bed made. Curtain slightly open. Nightstand in place. But the officer wasn't looking at any of that. He was staring at my window. Specifically, at the faint smudge marks on the glass. Finger marks. Long ones. Like someone had pressed their hand against the window and leaned forward to look outside. To look across the street. Toward House 12. I felt dizzy. "That's not from me," I said. The officer nodded. Then he did something that made my heart nearly stop. He placed his hand against the glass, lining it up with the smudge. His hand was smaller. The marks on the window were longer. Thinner. The fingers slightly too extended. Almost unnatural. The officer stepped back slowly. "Have you had anyone in your house recently?" he asked. "No." "Anyone with access?" "No." He didn't reply. Instead, he walked to my nightstand. My phone charger was lying there. But it wasn't mine. Different brand. Different color. Mine was downstairs, where I dropped it earlier. I felt a wave of cold rush through my body. "That wasn't here before," I whispered. The officers exchanged a look. Then one of them asked, very carefully, "Do you know someone who might be trying to scare you?" I shook my head. Because this wasn't someone trying to scare me. This was someone who had already been inside. Watching. Standing at my window in the middle of the night. While I slept. My phone buzzed from downstairs. All three of us flinched. The officer nearest the stairs went down to check. A moment later, he called up. "You need to see this." I walked down slowly. My phone was on the floor where I dropped it earlier. Screen lit up. New message. Unknown number. A photo. Taken from inside my bedroom. Of me. Sleeping. I stared at the photo until my vision blurred. It was me. Curled on my side, blanket pulled to my shoulder, face turned toward the window. The angle was slightly elevated, like whoever took it was standing near the foot of my bed. Watching. The officer took the phone from my hand carefully, like it might explode. "Don't touch anything," he said. He zoomed into the image. The room was dark except for faint blue light from outside the porch light across the street. House 12. Still on. Which meant the picture was taken during one of those nights I stood at my window, staring back. I felt nauseous. "Check the time," the second officer said. He swiped up. The timestamp appeared. 3:12 a.m. Last night. I couldn't breathe. "That's impossible," I whispered. I was awake around then. I remember looking at the window. The officer looked at me. "Are you sure you didn't fall asleep after?" I shook my head slowly. No. I remembered standing there. Watching. Feeling watched. If this photo was taken at 3:12. Then someone was inside my room while I was awake. Close enough to photograph me. And I never saw them. The officer's radio crackled, making all of us jump. He stepped aside to respond while the other officer kept staring at the image. Then he frowned. "Wait," he said. He zoomed further into the background of the photo. To the window. My curtains. Slightly open. And through the gap. You could see House 12. But something was wrong. The porch light was off. Completely dark. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "That can't be right," I said. The light was on all night. I saw it. The officer looked at me carefully. According to this photo, it wasn't. Which meant one thing. The light I saw from my window wasn't coming from the porch. It was coming from inside my own room. Behind me. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. The officer turned the phone toward me again. "Look at the reflection," he said quietly. I leaned closer. In the glass of the window, faint but visible, there was a shape behind me. Tall. Standing beside the bed. Watching me sleep. The outline of a head. Shoulders. Too still. Too straight. And the worst part? It wasn't facing me. It was facing the window. Looking across the street. As if something in House 12 was watching both of us. My phone buzzed again in his hand. Another message. "You're looking at the wrong house." I read the message 3 times before it made sense. "You're looking at the wrong house." My mind tried to reject it. Deny it. Twist it into something logical. But the truth was already forming, heavy and sickening. If I wasn't supposed to be watching House 12, then what was I supposed to be watching? I slowly turned toward my living room window. The one facing the street. The one I had stared through for 3 nights. The officers followed my gaze. From where we stood, we could see straight outside. House 12 looked the same as always. Curtains drawn. Porch dark. Empty. Normal. But something felt different now. Wrong in a way I couldn't explain. I walked toward the window slowly, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. And then I noticed it. My curtains. They weren't the way I left them. I always kept them slightly parted in the center. A small gap to let morning light in. But now, they were wider. Pulled back just enough to create a perfect viewing space. Like someone had adjusted them carefully. Deliberately. I reached out and touched the fabric. My fingers brushed against something cold. Metal. A hook. Attached to the wall beside the window. A hook that had never been there before. Connected to a thin, nearly invisible string. The string ran upward. Across the curtain rod. And disappeared into a tiny drilled hole in the wall. I stepped back, my mind racing. The officer traced it with his eyes. "Where does that go?" he asked quietly. I didn't answer. I already knew. Because the hole wasn't random. It was angled. Pointing directly toward the house next door. Not House 12. The other side. House 10. An older home. Quiet. Belonging to a woman I barely knew. Mrs. Elridge. She rarely came outside. Always kept her blinds shut. I had never once thought about that house. Never paid attention to it. Never questioned it. My hands started shaking. Because suddenly, I remembered something small. Something I ignored days ago. A faint scraping noise near my window late at night. I thought it was tree branches in the wind. But there were no trees on that side of the house. The officer gently tugged the string. The curtains shifted slightly. Perfectly. Smoothly. Controlled from somewhere else. Someone hadn't been watching me from across the street. They had been controlling what I saw. Directing my view. Making sure I focused on House 12. While they stayed hidden. Right next door. My phone buzzed again. A final message appeared. "You finally looked the right way." And at that exact moment, the blinds in Mrs. Elridge's window slowly lifted. From the inside. The blinds in Mrs. Elridge's window didn't snap up. They rose slowly. Smoothly. Like someone had been waiting for this exact moment. Waiting for me to finally look. I couldn't see inside clearly from where I stood, but I could see movement. A faint shift behind the glass. A shadow passing from one side of the room to the other. The officers stepped forward beside me. One of them reached for his radio. "Stay here," he said quietly. But I didn't listen. I was already walking toward the front door. Because something inside me knew this wasn't over. It wasn't about House 12. It wasn't about an empty home or a man who never lived there. It was about the house I had never paid attention to. House 10. The officers followed as I crossed the yard, my steps unsteady but fast. The afternoon air felt thick, heavy in my lungs. Every sound seemed too loud, my shoes on the pavement, my breathing, the faint rustle of leaves. We reached her front porch. The door was closed. The curtains inside were still. The officer knocked firmly. Police. No response. He knocked again, louder. Still nothing. Then we all heard it. A soft sound from inside. Not footsteps. Not movement. A clicking noise. Like something mechanical. Repeated. Slow. Precise. The officer tried the handle. Unlocked. He pushed the door open carefully. The smell hit us first. Not decay. Not rot. But stale air. Dust. Like a room sealed for a very long time. The living room was dim. Heavy curtains blocked most of the light. Furniture sat untouched, covered in a thin gray layer. No television. No decorations. No signs of daily life. Just like House 12. My heart pounded as we moved deeper inside. Then we found the room. At the end of a narrow hallway. A small bedroom. And inside it? A window. Wide open. Facing my house. The angle was perfect. Direct line of sight into my bedroom. Attached to the wall beside the window was a small pulley system. Thin strings. Hooks. Carefully arranged. Leading through tiny drilled holes in the wall. Toward my house. Toward my curtains. I felt dizzy. On the floor beneath the window sat a wooden chair. And beside it? A camera. Mounted on a tripod. Pointed directly at my bedroom. Still recording. The red light blinking. Active. One of the officers unplugged it quickly. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop even further. The window. It wasn't pushed outward like normal windows. It opened inward. Toward the room. Meaning someone had been standing here. Leaning out. Reaching across. Adjusting the strings by hand. Close enough to touch my wall. Close enough to hear me breathe at night. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. I already knew what it would say. I didn't want to read it. But I did. She doesn't live here anymore. The message sat on my screen while the officers searched the rest of the house. She doesn't live here anymore. I looked around the bedroom again. Dust coated everything evenly. No footprints. No signs of recent movement. The air felt old, trapped, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. And yet, the camera had been on. Recording. The curtain strings had been working. Someone had been here recently. Very recently. Sir, one of the officers called from the hallway. You need to see this. I stepped out slowly. He was standing in what must have been the master bedroom. The door had been half closed, and we hadn't noticed it before. Inside, the room was almost completely empty. Except for the wall. Covered in photographs. Dozens of them. All printed. All taped up in uneven rows. All of me. Sleeping. Walking around my house. Drinking coffee in the kitchen. Standing at my bedroom window at night, staring toward House 12. My chest tightened. Dates were written under each photo. Weeks of them. Maybe months. And then I saw something worse. Photos of my house from angles that weren't possible from this property. From inside. From my hallway. From my stairs. From my bedroom doorway. I felt like the floor had dropped away beneath me. He's been inside your house more than once, the officer said quietly. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even think. Then I noticed the final set of photos on the far corner of the wall. Older ones. Different house. Different person. An elderly woman. Mrs. Elridge. Standing in this same bedroom. Looking confused. Looking frightened. Looking toward the window. The dates were from 9 years ago. Right before property records showed she had moved. She hadn't moved. She had been watched. Just like me. Lured into focusing on something else. While someone lived beside her. Inside the walls of her life. The officer's radio crackled again. A report coming in. They had checked House 12 more thoroughly. And found something hidden in the attic. A sleeping bag. Food wrappers. Bottled water. Recent. Someone had been staying there. Not living. Watching. Using it as a distraction. A stage. I felt sick. Because I finally understood. There was never a Mr. Hargrove. No neighbor across the street. Just a man who needed me to look the wrong way. So I wouldn't notice the one place he could always reach me from. Right next door. And the worst part? They never found him. But sometimes, late at night, I still wake up feeling like someone is standing beside my bed. Watching the window. Waiting for me to look the wrong way again.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to Midnight Case File, like the video, and share it with others because more mysteries await you.